Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day today. If you're new here, welcome. Make sure to subscribe. We talk about true crime cases on this channel and also vlogs. I have a vlog coming very soon as well. But today we're going to be covering an unsolved case. It's the case of Lindsay Buziak, who was murdered in 2008 when she was just 24 years old. And this case, I really wanted to talk about it because it has been so heavy on my mind, and I think you guys will understand why as we get into it. Sorry in advance, by the way, if the lighting in this video is really all over the place. We have some friends staying with us at the moment, so I'm filming in a different room than I usually do, and the window here just does not take sunlight well, so it gets really dark and then really bright every few seconds, I swear. Today's video is brought to you by our sponsor Casetify. I just recently got the new iPhone 15 and it would already be in tiny little bits and pieces if it wasn't for Casetify cases, because I don't know what it is, but I cannot seem to hold onto my phone. I drop it a million times a day. I'm just very clumsy. I literally got my cases before I even got my phone. I have had a Casetify case on this phone since the minute I got it. Thankfully, Casetify cases are super protective. They're approved for drops of up to 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet, which is 4 times the military standard. Their iPhone 15 cases are also partially made from recycled and plant-based material. They're even partially made from upcycled phone cases as a part of their Recasetify program. And they're also super cute, not bulky at all, even though they're super protective. These are the 3 that I got for my new phone. Gotta have a rotation going because a phone case can honestly complete an outfit, especially in a cheeky mirror selfie. But Casetify has some amazing deals going on online and in store right now. I will leave more information on that in the description box down below, so make sure you check that out, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So today's case takes place in Victoria, which is right down in the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Lindsay Buziak was born there on the 2nd of November in 1983 to Jeff and Evelyn Buziak. Evelyn worked as a stay-at-home mum and Jeff worked as a real estate agent, and in 1983 they had another daughter named Sarah. Growing up, Lindsay was described as smart, happy, and full of joy. She was always really supportive of others, and her mother said that when she was younger, she actually saw a boy being picked on at school, and she stood up for him, which I honestly think is kind of huge because kids can be massive dicks. So to have the wherewithal when you're a kid to stand up to other kids who are being bullies, I just think it's super brave. In the mid-90s, Lindsay's parents split up. Her mother got primary custody of both her and her sister, and then in the early 2000s her father Jeff moved to Calgary, which is in Alberta. In 2001, when Lindsay was 18 years old, she started dating a guy named Matt McDuff, and they dated all the way until 2006. So it was a juicy relationship, but it wasn't always a happy relationship. Matt said that it could often be stormy and rocky and that Lindsay could be fiery, but it was the kind of relationship where Matt kind of always had this hold over Lindsay. It was a very dramatic, very intense relationship, so even when it was over, Lindsay was still, thinking about Matt. Anyway, eventually Lindsay decides to pursue a career in real estate. She was the kind of woman who could make friends with anyone. She was loved by everyone she knew. She was a popular gal, so this career was perfect for her. Her father had also been in the industry for 30 years as well. So she goes to the UBC Saunders School of Business and she does the real estate trading services program, and she got help from a real estate tutor named Helen Jones while she was there. In Helen's workshop, she meets a guy named Jason Zalo, who she kind of already knew him from, just around town. She didn't know him, but she knew of him, you know what I mean? He played hockey and he had a pretty wealthy family. His mother, Shirley Zalo, was also in the real estate industry, and she was actually the manager of Remax Commercium, and Lindsay just found the whole family super impressive. She and Jason clicked right away. He was a nice guy. He wasn't a drug user, which apparently was a big deal for Lindsay. So I guess her ex must have been into drugs or something, and Lindsay just really was not into drugs at all. But she passes her real estate exam in June of 2006, and around the same time her and Jason start dating. She also gets a job at a real estate agent called Maverick, and she works there for about a year and a half until late 2007 when she gets a job at Remax Commercium, which of course is where Jason's mum Shirley was the manager of. Jason worked there, and Jason's brother Ryan also worked at this real estate. And then at the same time that Lindsay got this job at Remax, her and Jason also moved in together in a 1-bedroom apartment in the inner harbour of Victoria, which Jason's family actually owned. By this point, Jason is 27 and Lindsay is 24 years old. So fast forward to February 1st, 2008, and Lindsay gets this really exciting call. It's from this woman who said that her husband is being transferred from Vancouver to Victoria, and so they wanted to buy a brand new $1 million home in Victoria, and they wanted Lindsay to be their real estate agent for this. They wanted to be no more than 15 minutes from town. They wanted 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a large primary bathroom, and they also wanted a separate area for the housekeeper, and they wanted it within 3 days, like ready to move in. In fact, they actually let Lindsay know that they were going to be catching the ferry from Vancouver over to Victoria the very next day on the 2nd of February at 5:30 p.m. and they wanted to see some houses when they were there and pretty much buy one that night. But this was a huge deal for Lindsay because she was still very new to her real estate career, so to get a client this huge that wants a $1 million home so early in her career is massive. So she was really excited, and she would also make like a pretty good commission as well. She would make like 3% on the sale, which is like $30,000. So after they get off the phone call, Lindsay immediately saves this woman's name in her phone as $1 million, and she gets right to work looking for a house that matches their specifications. And while she's looking, she's kind of getting to thinking that the whole thing actually seems too good to be true. Like the whole situation, something was just nagging at Lindsay that something was off. The woman that called herself was mysterious. She provided Lindsay with a name, but the woman is still a mystery to this day. So the name that she provided was actually fake. The call itself was super weird because the woman had kind of an accent, but the accent was, Lindsay described it as either being Spanish or Mexican, but not really. It was like a weird accent, she said. It sounded like she was actually faking the accent. On top of that, she asked the woman how she found her because, you know, it's a huge deal to bring to a new real estate agent. So she asked, you know, how did you find me? The woman had also called Lindsay on her personal phone number, so she had to have gotten it from somewhere, and she asked how she found her, and this woman told her that she was recommended to her from a previous client of Lindsay's. So Lindsay actually tries to contact this previous client of hers to kind of verify, but this client is out of town and they're unable to be contacted. So while Lindsay was really excited to have a deal this big so early in her career, she was also really concerned, and her concerns only grew over the next 24 hours because the whole situation was just super odd. Eventually she finds a house that matches what the client wants, and it's listed by another agent, but even if she sells this other agent's listing, she will still get a very decent commission from it. It's a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom house at 1702 D'Souza Place in Gordon's Head, which is in Saanich, which is a pretty nice area. It's quiet, it's got a lot of great schools, and the house itself was really nice as well, and it was being listed at $964,000. Later that night, she goes home to her apartment with Jason, and she's telling Jason about the house, about the client, about how the whole situation's just really weird. You know, she doesn't understand why they chose her because she doesn't have a lot of experience. She's really new to it. It just is kind of bizarre. And Jason was just really supportive. He encouraged her. He said, you know, it's a great opportunity and you deserve it. Lindsay also told her dad about the situation, and her dad shared the sentiment of, you know, it's a great opportunity, you deserve it. But he also said, you know, be careful and just, if you're feeling concerned, make sure somebody comes with you to the viewing. So she gets off the call with her dad and she kind of tells Jason, says, can you come with me to the viewing? And he says, you know, yeah, I'll be there. Lindsay had also been planning a bachelorette for her friend, which was meant to be taking place at around the same time as the viewing was taking place, so the next day at around 5:30, but the bachelorette party was on the mainland in Vancouver. So she was kind of planning to go to this viewing and then go over to mainland Vancouver to, you know, party with her friend for a bachelorette. So the next day rolls around, the 2nd of February, and Lindsay leaves for work, and after she's already left, the woman that, you know, the client calls up Lindsay's home phone, and Jason answers and and she kind of says, you know, can I speak to Lindsay? Jason says she's already left, she's at work, but you can catch her on her mobile. And Jason also described this woman as having maybe a broken Spanish accent. Later, Lindsay gets a call from this mystery couple to her mobile, and it's a 10-minute call, and during this call she basically gives them the address of the D'Souza Place property that they're going to meet at, and they agree to meet at 5:30 p.m. At around 2 p.m. she's at work, she's at the Remax Crimestoppers office, and she's acting pretty freaked out about the whole situation, about the meeting later that afternoon, and she asked two of the receptionists there to look up the names and number of this couple, but nothing comes up in their database, no real estate history. Another employee at Remax who was at the office that day also said that they overheard Lindsay talking to a small group of co-workers about how worried she was about this meeting, and a few of them offered to go with her to the viewing, and she said, you know, don't worry about it, you know, Jason's going to be coming with her. At 3 p.m. that day, she left the office and she went and met Jason at a nearby restaurant for lunch, and he just, you know, they were talking about the viewing. He assured her that he was going to be there, it was going to be okay, and they left lunch at 4:24 p.m. and they left separately. Lindsay went home, presumably to get changed and get ready for the viewing. Jason went to meet some clients nearby at SHC, which is an auto shop, and he got to the auto shop at 4:29 p.m. While he's there, he gets a few calls from his friend Cohen Oatman. They're on the same scrub hockey team, and they have plans to go and play a scrub hockey game later that night and, you know, get a few beers together while Lindsay is at her bachelorette party. Cohen ends up going to SHC to meet Jason. He gets there at 5 p.m. and when he gets there, Jason just kind of tells him, you know, before we go out, I just have to go and check on Lindsay. She's got this viewing she's really concerned about. She just called me up to make sure I'm still coming. And Cohen says, you know, of course, no worries. We'll stop by before we continue on with our night. And they are seen leaving SHC in Jason's Range Rover at 5:30 p.m., which is, of course, when the viewing is meant to be starting. I don't know why they were leaving so late, considering Lindsay had repeatedly said how concerned she was about this viewing, and viewings don't really go for that long, so it's not the sort of thing you can be super late for. Anyway, they leave at 5:30 p.m. Meanwhile, Lindsay arrives at 1702 D'Souza Place just before 5:30 p.m. and there's a lockbox there that has the key in it, and she accesses that lockbox, which I guess is like got computer access or something, or I don't know, but they know that she accessed the lockbox at 5:29 p.m. Just after this time, she gets a call from Jason because the sat-nav in his car wasn't working, so he called Lindsay to ask for directions, and just as he does, the mystery couple shows up at the house, so Lindsay really quickly has to say, I'm sorry, they're here, I've got to go, and she hangs up the phone, and Jason texts her, asks for the address. She texts back and sends him the address. She meets with this couple and shakes hands with them in the driveway of the property, and then she takes them inside the property to start the viewing. A few minutes later, Jason ends up calling his brother Ryan to get directions to the house because he's got the address, but like I said, his sat-nav isn't working, so he doesn't know how to get there. So he calls his brother, asks for directions, and then he sends Lindsay a text at 5:38 p.m. saying that he's just a couple of minutes away. Lindsay never gets this text. The text is never opened. At 5:41 p.m., Lindsay calls an old friend that she hasn't spoken to in forever. This person doesn't answer the phone, and Lindsay leaves a voicemail, but it's just like a lot of muffled sounds. So it's believed that this was actually a pocket dial, and the pocket dial was a direct result of Lindsay having been attacked. Jason and Cohen arrive at the property at 5:45 p.m. and by this point it's already getting dark because it's winter, so the lights in the house are on, and also the way that Jason kind of pulled up in his Range Rover, his lights shone on the front door of the house, so he and Cohen could actually see the people inside the house. Like, they were silhouettes because the front door had windows, but they were opaque, so they were just silhouettes, but they said that it looked like these people were kind of getting ready to put their shoes on and leave the house, and then when they saw the lights of his car, they kind of turned around and went back into the house. Jason said that at the time he believed that this meant that the viewing had just started because they were at the front door and then they were moving further into the house, and so he drove past the house and went and parked at the end of the cul-de-sac. He parks his car facing away from the house, but he can still see the house in his rear vision mirror, and you know, Lindsay had kind of asked him to be there but not to be involved in the showing. She didn't want him to go in, he didn't want to seem like, you know, the overbearing boyfriend, so he was just kind of there for support, to be outside in case something did go wrong. wrong or she felt uncomfortable or whatever the case may be. So he waits there for about 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes has passed, he sends Lindsay a text asking if she's okay, and she doesn't reply. So at 5:55 p.m. he turns his car around, leaves the cul-de-sac and turns right onto Torquay Drive, which is like the main road that D'Souza Place cul-de-sac branches off from. And now he's pulled up right next to the house because 1702 D'Souza Place was a corner block and it cornered D'Souza Place cul-de-sac and Torquay Drive. He sits in this new spot right next to the house for about 5 minutes, but he can't see anything because there's like a lot of shrubbery between the road and the house from where he's sitting. So he tries to call Lindsay, she doesn't answer, and at 6 p.m. he and Cohen decide to get out of the car and go up to the house and knock on the front door. And they're knocking and they're ringing the doorbell, but no one answers. The door is locked, so he goes to check the lockbox for a key, but there's no key in there. There was also like a little keypad that you can use to put in a code and it'll open the garage door for you and you can get in that way. So he tried paging the listing agent to get this code, but the listing agent didn't reply right away. And obviously Jason, like, he wants to get in there as soon as possible. He is getting stressed now. He's getting really worried. So he calls his mum Shirley and asks her for the mobile number of the listing agent. He calls the listing agent right away. Listing agent gives him the code. He hangs up the phone and the code doesn't work, so he can't get into the garage. There's another door around the side of the house, so he goes around the side to check that door, but it's also locked. And by this point he's getting really stressed out because I mean the whole situation is just really shady. He hasn't heard from Lindsay. She's in there, all the doors are locked, he can't get in contact with her. It's just a really sketchy situation. So he starts asking Cohen, like, should I just break the window? And Cohen says, look, maybe we should just call the police first. So at 6:05 p.m. Jason calls the police, and while he's on the phone telling police this, Cohen is kind of going around the perimeter of the house to see if there's another way in, and he sees that there's a patio and there's like these French doors on the patio that are actually open, but they're enclosed in a fence because the whole backyard is enclosed in a fence. So he goes around, he gets Jason helps to boost Cohen over the fence so that he can go in through the French doors, and he goes to the front door, unlocks it and lets Jason in. Once they get in, Cohen searches downstairs, Jason goes upstairs to search upstairs, and as he's going up the stairs he can see Lindsay's body. She is slumped up against the bedroom wall. There is a ton of blood around her. She's in a pool of blood and she has been brutally murdered, having been stabbed multiple times with an edged weapon. She had cuts all over her body, including her abdomen and her chest. She had no defensive wounds, so it's theorized that she had been stabbed first in the back as she turned around to show the couple through the primary bedroom and ensuite. As soon as Jason found Lindsay's body, he ran immediately up to her and gathered her in his arms, and he called down to Cohen to call 911, and that call was made at 6:11 p.m. While Cohen was on the phone, Jason was trying to perform CPR on Lindsay, but it was just too late. He was saying that while he was performing CPR, when he would breathe into her mouth, he could just hear the air coming right back out through her neck. That's how bad her injuries were. Police arrived at the scene pretty quickly after because they were already on their way from Jason's first 911 call, and they took both Jason and Cohen to the station separately to question them separately. They also cordoned the house off as a crime scene and did forensic tests, but they didn't find any fingerprints or DNA or anything like that. What they did find though were bloody footprints. They found a trail of them on the stairs. Police also brought out canine units to try and track the killers, but they didn't pick up on any scents. So it's believed that the killers exited through the back patio doors that were left open and then went through a gap in the back fence of the property. There was like 3 fence boards that had been kicked out, and behind that fence were a bunch of trees and shrubs so you wouldn't be seen by the road. From there, it's believed that they had a getaway vehicle because, like I said, the canines couldn't really track anything, so it seems like they must have gotten into a vehicle and left. But neither Jason nor Cohen saw anybody leave the property. As I said, Jason and Cohen were taken to the station immediately to be questioned separately. Neither of them saw anybody leave the property. Their stories matched up exactly, and police also found footprints, like Jason and Cohen's footprints at the scene, which corroborated their story. Jason even turned over his phone phone, a laptop he and Lindsay shared, and also took part in a polygraph test. And a few days after the murder, he also went back to the murder house with police and did a reenactment of his movements from the day of the murder. And this was filmed. There was audio released from this, so he was fully cooperative with the police. There was also CCTV footage which showed Jason and Cohen leaving the SHC auto shop at 5:30 p.m, which is when the murder occurred. So he couldn't have possibly been involved, and so both Jason and Cohen were cleared by police as suspects. They also cleared Lindsay's ex-boyfriend Matt McDuff as a suspect pretty early on as well. They went and questioned him extensively because obviously, you know, police always look into family, partners, ex-partners first. But Matt and Lindsay had been broken up for 2 years by this point. Matt had a new girlfriend, Lindsay was dating Jason, and Lindsay and Matt had been no contact for a few months by the time of the murder. Matt was also with his girlfriend over an hour away from where the murder took place at the time the murder took place, so there was no way that he could have done it. So honestly, he was never really a suspect at all. Back at the crime scene, police were going door to door. They were going through neighbors' backyards with flashlights. They canvassed the area. They spoke to the neighbors. They had a few witnesses that said they had seen Lindsay greeting this couple at 5:30 p.m, saw them shaking hands, and said that it was in the driveway of the property and it looked like first introductions, like they had never met before. They also said that there was no other car at the property. So this was like a really small cul-de-sac street. So I feel like the neighbors would notice if there was like a random car they didn't recognize in the street, but there wasn't one. So I don't know if maybe the couple parked around the corner, parked down the block, or maybe they even had a getaway car where someone was like going to come pick them up right after they committed the murder. I don't know. But they described the man as being tall. He had brown hair and he was also wearing a brown jacket that was described as being classy. The woman was described as having short blonde hair that could have been a wig. She was also wearing this black, red and white patterned dress, and that she was around 35 to 40 years old, and they were both Caucasian. In the years since the murder, there has also been a composite sketch released of the female suspect, but it's honestly like not good. It's really bad. I don't even think I would recognize my best friend if they released a drawing of her like that. So the whole thing was just so insane. No one could think of any motive anyone would have to murder Lindsay. It wasn't a robbery because the house was like a house ready to be sold, right? There was nothing in it. And Lindsay was found with her bag, her watch, her jewelry, her money, her purse. Like it was all still there with her. So there was no robbery. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but the murder itself was so brutal. Like to stab someone so many times is so personal, and the fact that you have to be in such close proximity, like looking at this person while you do it. And she was stabbed multiple times to the point where Jason could hear air coming out of her stab wounds as he tried to give her CPR. So as police continue their investigation, they even look into Joe D'Souza, whose family owned the cul-de-sac, and they were developing the cul-de-sac that the murder house was on. And they took DNA from him, fingerprints, shoe prints, like footprints, and he was cleared as a suspect. They obviously searched the house thoroughly, but never really came up with any sort of forensic evidence. So I don't know if the killers were like wearing gloves or what, but they clearly knew what they were doing, or enough so that, you know, they've never been caught to this day. It's also never been said if police ever found a murder weapon, but it was believed that only one weapon was used in the murder. Police also went through Lindsay's phone, and from that they were able to find the number that the killer used. And from this number, they were able to determine that the phone had been purchased from a convenience store in Vancouver in late 2007, and it had been registered under the name Paula Rodriguez, which was a fake name. It was like a prepaid phone, so you could register online with a name and an address, but it didn't have to be verified, so you could really just put down any name and address. They also found that despite when the phone was purchased, it wasn't activated until just a couple of days before Lindsay's murder. So it was actually activated right before that first phone call to Lindsay was made from the like mystery woman with the fake accent. And the phone was only ever used to call Lindsay. So they called a Lindsay 11 times in total, and that was it. The phone was never used again. They were also able to track where the phone was used based on where it pinged each time it was used. Coast, and they found that the first calls that were made to Lindsay were made from Vancouver, and then 24 hours before the murder, it travelled to Victoria, and then, of course, after the murder, it was never used again. On further investigation, police also found that Lindsay's online activity in the lead up to her murder was super strange. So there were a lot of like chats and messages that were missing, and there was this weird period between the 24th of July and the 3rd of February 2008, so 2 weeks before Lindsay's murder until one day after her murder, and there are no messages between Lindsay and anyone between this time, which is super unusual for Lindsay. You know, she's got 700 Facebook friends and she's not messaged a single person for 2 weeks. And obviously, like, police went back and looked at how she usually talks to people, how often she usually talks to people, and it's definitely not 0 messages in 2 weeks. So this was just really weird. I don't know if Lindsay went through and deleted this or if there was something incriminating, so the killer went through and managed to get into her Facebook and delete her messages, but it was really, really odd. And that is most of the information that is known about the case. As part of the investigation, police have conducted something like 1,500 interviews. They've followed up on 750 leads. They've executed 30 search warrants. But still, despite all of that, they have never publicly named a suspect in this case. This case is still unsolved and there are still so many questions. So obviously there has been a lot of speculation about what really happened and who the killers really are. I mean, they used this one specific phone to lure Lindsay to her death. They used this phone only to contact Lindsay, no one else. So this was clearly very planned out. But why? Who would go through this much effort to murder Lindsay? You know, she was well liked, she didn't have beef with anyone that anybody knows about, so it just didn't make any sense. There was some speculation that Lindsay's boyfriend Jason was involved because, you know, people always look at family, partners, ex-partners first, but basically the reason people think that he might be involved is because he was 10 minutes late to a viewing that Lindsay was clearly very concerned about, and then it took him another 35 minutes with no signs of Lindsay for him to actually go and check on her, which I don't really think is that crazy. Lindsay didn't want him to come in. She just wanted him to be there for support in case something weird happened, which, you know, it did, so her intuition was correct. But he also didn't want to be the meddling boyfriend, and I'm sure not in his wildest dreams did he think that she was going to go in for a property viewing and she was going to be murdered, especially while he was sitting right outside. Like, there's no way he thinks that this is happening right under his nose and he's not hearing anything or seeing anything, and he hasn't seen anybody come out of the house. And for all he knows, they were in there asking questions, getting ready to potentially put an offer down, because I know they're not real buyers, but they were saying that they were like very motivated, practically wanted to purchase a house that night, and they wanted to move in there in 3 days time. So they could have been in there getting ready to purchase this property for all he knew. Anyway, what was actually more of a concern, and I think more so the reason people were speculating Jason was involved, is because he and Lindsay had been having some relationship troubles since like early 2007. At that time, they were living in a house that Jason's mum Shirley owned in Shawnigan Lake, and they were living in the basement of the house for the summer. During this time, Lindsay was just really unhappy in the relationship. She was saying she wanted to break up. She was even looking for places that she could go and move into downtown by herself, but her and Jason managed to work it out, and that is when they went and moved into the 1-bedroom place in the inner harbour of Victoria that Jason's mum Shirley owned, and also the same time that Lindsay went and started working at Remax Comosum with Jason, Ryan, and their mum Shirley, who was the manager of the place. A couple of months later, in December of 2007, Lindsay flew to Calgary to go and visit her dad Jeff there, and while she was there, she was telling her dad that again, she was really unhappy and she wanted to break up with Jason. She was saying that he doesn't have the same ambition as her, and Jeff also said that Lindsay felt that Jason was, quote, overbearing and demanding and, you know, jealous, possessive. She came out to Calgary to speak to me about that. Allegedly, while she was there, she also brought up the fact that she missed her ex-boyfriend, Matt McDuff. Lindsay's close friend, Vicky, also confirmed all of these things. You know, Lindsay was telling her these same things that she was telling her dad. So Lindsay was just not happy in the relationship with Jason. Then Lindsay returns back to Victoria, and she goes on a trip to Whistler with Jason and his family, and apparently, you know, they have a great time, they work things out, and Lindsay's feeling better about the relationship. Jason said, quote, "We had so much fun in Whistler, this was the perfect thing, we needed to spend more time together." And that's it. That is the reason people think that Jason is responsible, or like he hired somebody to murder Lindsay, because he loved her and he wanted to be with her. I don't know about you guys, but that just doesn't sound super sinister to me. I mean, look, I know people have murdered their partners for similar sort of reasons, but I feel like normally the circumstances are very different. It just doesn't seem like the case here to me. And not to mention, he is seen on CCTV footage getting into his car like 10-15 minutes away from the murder at the time the murder was taking place. So it's physically impossible that he committed the murder. The only way that he could be involved is if he like hired somebody. But this doesn't seem like the work of a hired killer. It's way too personal. A hired killer is not getting up in your face, stabbing you a bunch of times, so much so that there's like air coming out of your stab wounds when someone tries to give you CPR. It's way too messy. It's way too personal. The killer would get the blood of the victim all over themselves because they're at such close range. So it's just like a bit sloppy, I think, for somebody who has been hired to have committed the murder in this way. Even police have said outright that they believe that this was a very amateurish killing. Another theory that came about, and police actually came up with this theory, is that this murder was in relation to a big operation and big drug bust. Lindsay is said not to be involved with or taken any drugs herself, but she was friends on Facebook with violent criminals and people who were involved with selling drugs. And her ex-boyfriend, Matt McDuff, also knew some people who were very heavily involved with dealing drugs. I mean, he himself was like kind of involved in that world as well. I mean, Lindsay, when she met Jason and she was like telling her friends about Jason, she was really excited that he wasn't involved in drugs. And why would you be excited about that unless your ex-boyfriend, like you had some issues with them and drugs? Back in 2003, when Matt and Lindsay were still dating, there was this whole big thing called the British Columbia legislature raids. I can't even tell if I'm pronouncing that wrong. You know when you just say a word too many times and it just sounds wrong? That's me with legislature right now. I even looked up the Google pronunciation. It feels like I'm saying it right, but it just sounds so wrong. Anyway, this basically happened because of a big drug deal that happened within British Columbia Parliament buildings, and Matt may have potentially known some people that were involved in this. I think he and Lindsay's phones may have even been tapped during the investigation. Then, as we know, in December of 2007, Lindsay went to go and visit her father in Calgary in Alberta. A few weeks after that, on the 22nd of January, so just 11 days before Lindsay was murdered, one of the biggest drug busts in Alberta's history took place. There was this year-long investigation, and they seized 80 kilos of cocaine, which is worth about $8 million from this house in Calgary. Now, Matt was actually arrested in connection with this whole thing, and he also knew a bunch of people that were involved in this drug bust, and so by association, Lindsay also knew of these people from her time when she was dating Matt. And then to add to this theory, when Lindsay got home from visiting her father in Calgary in Alberta, she visited the Facebook page of somebody who came to be known as somebody who was involved in this drug operation, and then she also tried to contact them by phone, and police have no idea why she tried to contact this person by phone, and they have no idea what this phone call entailed. Obviously, after a big drug bust like this, there are a lot of paranoid people who are looking for somebody to blame. So the theory is that Lindsay maybe saw something she shouldn't have, or that she was even mistaken for somebody who was like an informant or something like that. I think Lindsay's dad even tried to suggest that when she had visited him in Calgary, that she had told him she had seen something that she wasn't supposed to, but there was no elaboration on that at all. A lot of people think that that's not really the case because, like I said, there was no elaboration on it, and you would think you would ask questions like, what did you see? Or there would be some more sort of information surrounding that, and nobody else in her life can corroborate that story at all. The main thing that doesn't make sense about this theory to me, again is that this just doesn't seem like the work of like a drug cartel. This doesn't seem like the work of a professional killer. It's very personal, it's very sloppy, it's very messy. The police have even said that it's a very amateurish murder, and I just don't think drug cartels are like carrying out super amateurish murders. I feel like they know what they're doing. There's also no evidence to suggest that Lindsay was an informant. I'm sure the police would be able to figure out if she was an informant or not after her death. There's no evidence to indicate that she was involved in drugs or did drugs herself. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, but the fact that she did try to randomly call this guy who was like involved in this humongous drug bust is obviously kind of sketchy. But you know, maybe she was just contacting him because she knew him from back when she knew Matt. Like, we really don't know the extent of it. It is just a little bit weird. In the end, police have also said that they don't believe that this theory holds a lot of weight. It's just way more likely that somebody close to Lindsay committed this murder, but there's no evidence, there's no even speculation about who else this could be, about anyone in Lindsay's life who would want to do something like this. It is so confusing. Lindsay's dad, Jeff, believes that two men who are involved in drug dealings definitely know who is involved. He says that these two guys have been very confrontational and has even threatened him. Personally, I have no idea what to think. I just don't think either of the two theories that have been put out there are very good. Like, I don't think either of them hold much weight. So I have no idea what I think could have happened, but I just think it's such an important case to talk about because it is still unsolved. To this day, there is no more, information on who this could be or what happened to Lindsay, and I cannot imagine how hard that must be on her family. But that is everything from me. That's all for this case today. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below because it truly has been heavy on my mind. I cannot stop thinking about this case since I first heard about it. But that is it from me. I will talk to you guys in the comments, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, guys.